Ever wish a podcast would explain how to get better faster from the standpoint of longevity, biohacking, and personalized functional medicine? Co-hosts Dr. Jason Bradley and James Chester, along with executive producer Rachel Bradley, bring you the Get Better Faster podcast. Their mission is radically simple: to revolutionize health by connecting people with the experts, technologies, and protocols that mainstream medicine ignores. Because people deserve to get better faster.
Hello, Get Better Faster Nation. I'm Dr. Jason Bradley, and along with my co-host, the one, the only James Chester, and our incredible executive producer, Rachel Bradley, we want to welcome you to another exciting episode of the Get Better Faster podcast. Today, we're joined by a man who has been called the modern-day Napoleon Hill. Govindh Jayaraman is the founder, writer, and host of Paper Napkin Wisdom book and podcast, a best-selling author of 11 books, an executive coach, and a behavior change expert who has interviewed over 1,000 of the world's most successful entrepreneurs and leaders. Here's what makes Govindh's story incredible for our audience. He actually has walked the walk. He once weighed nearly 400 pounds, and his business was in freefall. But by implementing the very principles he teaches, focus, align, and act, he lost over 160 pounds and paid off more than $6 million in debt, and then rebuilt his company to over $100 million in sales. Govindh has also built a company around diabetes prevention programs, so he knows firsthand how small intentional changes can literally save lives. His core message: growth is about subtraction, to stop doing what's holding you back before you pile on more. I want to know more about that. Without further ado, Govindh, my good friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jason. Thanks for having me, James. It's thrilling to be here. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm just getting to chance to know you, and Jason creates these like 20-page like dossiers on our guests. So I've read plenty about your background and your accomplishments, and I'm curious because I tell everybody annually they should read Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. And I just completed 75 Hard a couple weeks ago. And the first book that I told Jason and Rachel that we should all read is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. So it said that you're a modern day Napoleon Hill. And I'm just curious for you to take us back to the beginning when you all started everything at like 18 years old. And I know that you've run everything based on your bio here, from real estate to medical tech. When did you first realize that you had the wisdom and you were collecting on those paper napkins that Jason was talking about on your intro, that could actually help people get better faster, not just in business, but in health? And as he mentioned, with diabetes and that train of like medical conditions and betterment for their life. When did you realize that you had something that could get people better faster based on your wisdom and your workflows?
That's a great question. I don't even know that it dawned on me until recently, even after starting the work. I mean, really, really plainly, I think we all, as entrepreneurs, we get curious about things. We get curious about solving problems. We get curious about finding solutions. We get curious about a puzzle. It's a puzzle, right? Life's a puzzle. World's a puzzle. Everything's a puzzle. And we start to put together these pieces and start to find interest and opportunity and momentum in putting together those pieces, those puzzle pieces that sometimes they fit together really neatly. And sometimes you have to go somewhere else to get that missing link, that missing ingredient. And one of the things that I guess I've always been pretty good at is asking advice from people who have been there before. When I was really young, I was 15 or 16 years old, and I wrote a letter to the by far biggest real estate developer that existed in my part of the world. So I grew up in Ottawa, Canada. I still live here, and the number one real estate developer in this part of the world was a guy by the name of Robert Campo, so Bob Campo. And that name is pretty famous because Campo Corporation ended up buying Bloomingdale's, and some will say that he caused the junk bond crisis of the late 80s, early 90s. But I was just so inspired by this guy who had no education and created a multi-billion-dollar company, literally just out of his own will, sheer force of will. So I wrote him a letter. And I did that when I was 15 or 16 years old. And the thing I did was I cut out a little article. My dad said, "Hey, why don't you cut out this little announcement that he's been named to the board of directors somewhere and say something nice." So my best thing that I could come up with was, "Hey, I think you have a really nice tie. Where'd you get it?" And I sent him this letter as a 15-year-old. And a few years later, I would meet him. We went for lunch, and so I've never hesitated from reaching out to people who have walked the path before and asked for their advice, their guidance, their wisdom. And I think somewhere along the way, I had this idea that wouldn't it be neat to and some of those times we'd be in a restaurant or in a bar or somewhere like that, and I'd look for whatever paper I could find, and of course what I'd find paper napkins, and when you find those paper napkins, I would be taking notes from what they would be telling me. And then I wondered how neat would it be to share those in some kind of a book. And I had this grand vision, James, that I would travel the world, go to the best restaurants, their favorite restaurant, and sit down and talk to them about what their pearl of wisdom was that changed their life, their great piece of wisdom. And I talk about the meal and everything like that. And then I realized that would take a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of time away from my family. I had 3 young kids at the time, and that didn't sound very appealing anymore. So somebody suggested to me, "Hey, have you thought about a podcast?" And that's where the podcast was born. And that's where sharing the wisdom that I was learning came from. And make no mistake, I never, and this is going to probably be part of her story, I struggled with owning anything that I was sharing as being anything to do with me. I felt so privileged to be able to speak with these great leaders and share their wisdom that I took no share of ownership of anything. And that really held me back because I diminished my own contribution in collecting, harvesting, and sharing that information with the world. And that was a big learning opportunity for me along the way. So your question was, when did I accumulate all this wisdom and realize that I had something to share? I don't know. I think I'm still figuring that out now.
Well, I think the question sparked up a lot of interesting secondary questions. But I guess my first thing that just is my curious moment is, what's your favorite type of napkin to write on?
That's a great question because a lot of them really suck. They tear apart pretty quickly. And so I'm really like, I've looked around a lot, and there's this one company that makes these branded napkins for us.
Yeah.
And I really like them. They work a little bit more like paper, like writing paper, so it doesn't tear apart very easily, but it still looks like a paper napkin. It is an actual cocktail napkin, and it's used that way. So it works pretty well.
And I'm one of these guys.
Yeah. Post-it notes.
Do you ever cheat on your napkins and go to one of these sticky guys?
James, I'm a big phony nowadays because now I use a Remarkable for everything.
Okay.
So I'm on my Remarkable, and I love it because I can have hundreds of notebooks for every single reason, every single purpose. One for my journal, one for my health stack, one for this, one for that. And so it's beautiful to have all of these things in something that is so small and so portable and so powerful.
But do you do any type of workshops with people, like events and things?
Yeah, you bet. Yep.
Do you let them write on Post-it notes or Remarkables?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm like I said, I'm flexible as long as you're writing, and I think that this is a big thing. I think for me, one of the things I started to realize and learn is that I like shortcuts. I like ways to do things faster, right? If I can do things faster and easier, I'm all in. And so along the way, there are lots of little shortcuts that you can use. And you can use technology to do things. You can use Post-it notes, and you can use AI to create, beautiful content and capture conversations. So if you can use any of these tools to make your life easier and better, all in.
I want to pass this to Dr. Jason, but I have one more napkin question. Do you have a favorite napkin in your collection?
Oh man, I have a lot. So I have thousands and thousands of napkins, and people send me napkins. They'll go to a conference and somebody will give them a napkin and they'll send it to me, or they'll send me some. So I get a lot of napkins. And for a while I had them all displayed behind me, and there were so many memorable ones. I think some of my favorites, believe it or not, I mean, probably not surprisingly, came from my kids and their little messages that I would get from them when I would come home after a trip. I used to do a lot of travel, and I'm lucky that I don't have to do that anymore. And I think technology is wonderful for that, because I get to be home and be with them a lot more than I used to be able to. I was one of those guys that was really happy to lose my super elite status with the airlines. I was, happy to give that card back when it was over. And for me, those little notes are definitely my favorite and most special.
Well, make sure that you send our team over your address, and our Get Better Faster team will write some paper napkins and make sure we mail those out to you so you can add those to the collection.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
I appreciate that too. I did not expect those questions, James. So thank you for that that little intro. And I think the idea, Govindh, when we first met, and I was learning about Paper Napkin Wisdom, it was actually, quite frankly, a little anxiety driving to me. But let me explain.
Okay.
It's in its simplicity. I am not known for being ever getting tired of the sound of my own voice. I just want to say that, I'm long-winded. I need to be edited a whole lot. I remember I was writing something for some publication at some point, and the editor wanted to, cut some stuff. And I was arguing with him over like these cuts. And he flat out said, he goes, "You do realize that my whole job is to make your writing sound better, and you look smarter, and I get no credit for that." He's like, "That's all you." And he actually said, and I'm going to cuss, guys, fair warning, not safe for work right now. He said, "Bradley, they're just fucking words," and it really hit home with me, and I was like, why am I so attached to this? So with Paper Napkin Wisdom, I instantly thought of a couple of great quotes. One of them from Mark Twain, a couple of famous quotes. "I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time." Right. I love this idea that there's genius in brevity, but to get to brevity, to really distill down a thought, it takes time to do that, to put your heart into it. And then I immediately thought of Einstein, which is, if you can't explain things simply, you don't understand it well enough. And then I was like, I must not understand things really well then, because I over explain things. And so when you presented to me like, hey, let's have you on the show, and send over your Paper Napkin Wisdom, just a quick little gold nugget, I got intimidated, and it was very intimidating to me, because there's the fewer the words. Anybody that's a podcaster, a writer, which everybody on this podcast is right now. We all have books, we have podcasts, we have everything that we do. Every word can carry weight, and the fewer words you give me that have to fit on a note, the more weight each word has to take. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate the concept to distill wisdom into what can be written down on a napkin. I really appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, Jason, on that for a second, you would be, well, maybe you wouldn't be surprised at just how many absolutely phenomenal, like 5-star leaders, entrepreneurs, innovators, creators who struggle desperately with brevity they had an invitation to join me, and they couldn't get it onto a napkin, and then they'd jam every square inch of the napkin with a word or a drawing or something and send it off. It's like, I can't use that, it doesn't work. And so those are two great quotes. And there's another one that I like, is that there's simplicity on this side of complexity, and there's simplicity on the other side of complexity. And, simplicity on this side of complexity looks like a 3-integer equation, 1 + 1 = 2. Our babies can do this with their fingers. They can do finger math, finger puppet math, and figure that stuff out. But simplicity on the other side of complexity is E equals MC squared, using Einstein again. And the reality is we strive for simplicity on the other side of complexity, and many times never make it all the way through the complexity loop, never get through the complexity to the simplification, but embolden ourselves by understanding the complexity and then explaining it to people. And unfortunately, it's not transferable until it's simple again. So I think that one of the things that the napkin forces is it forces us to really think about what we're going to put on there and where we're going to start. And that's, I think, really important, really vital.
That gets us to the next, turning the page of the next napkin. Focus, align, act. Your core frameworks. And talk about that briefly, and then follow up with that on growth being by subtraction. You're talking about finger hand math. You're talking about Einstein. And I know nothing happens until something moves. That's
Right.
one of my favorite Einstein quotes. So let's Einstein this focus, align, and act, and subtraction into addition.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great place to start because, you know, when I had already had the premise of the book, and I was talking to a great author. You know, she's a great speaker, coach, and author coach, and just a wonderful communicator. Her name's Sam Horn, and I happened to be there with my wife at an event where she was, and we were having breakfast together. And I gave her the whole outline, and she sat back and she said, "So what you're really saying," and she sort of looked up and she said, "What you're really saying is focus, align, act." And she gave me that gift. And I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying." And so back then, now this is 11, 12 years ago that I started with this activation framework. And back then I really thought, okay, focus on your vision, focus. I made it very businessy. And at the time I was very confident that this was right. So focus on your vision, and then align your team with your vision, and then act and measure your actions so that you can keep people on track. And that's what I used to say. And what's really interesting is how superficial that was. Simplicity on the other side of complexity. I thought it was E equals MC squared, but I was so wrong. I completely missed it. I hadn't gone through the complexity yet with this framework. Now, 10 or 11 years later, it looks very different. So focus on what you want, and not in a future delay, like not in a, if I achieve these things in my life, I'm going to be happy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about sort of like projecting happiness at some future state and suspending all of your joy until that point. People say that kind of stuff, and that's not what this is. This is literally being able to create an image, a 3D movie of what you want, and you're in the middle of it. You're looking at things with your own eyes. You're smelling with your own nose. You can smell what you smell. You can see what you see. You can feel what you can feel. You can taste what you can taste. You hear what you can hear, and you're right in the picture just before you achieve everything you want. And then go right through that, finding out that you've achieved what you wanted, and start and continue to live. But really putting yourself in that sort of quantum mindset that you're in that space, really experiencing it. That's what focus means. And align is, okay, so now that you focused on that, align with where you are. And what does that mean? It means, you know, we brush our teeth, we do a lot of things to take care of our physical body every single day, but we don't generally apply the same rigor to our mindset and our mind. So clean our mental lens, get present in our body, give yourself some massive self-love every single day. And I mean, look yourself in the mirror every single day, write in your journal every single day that I believe in you and I love you just the way you are. You do this for 6 months or a year, that alone will transform your life. So what's the point of doing this in this activation framework? Well, the point of doing this is to get present with where you are right now, because when we're going after some kind of big goal, the traverse can be back and forth along the side of a mountain, right? We're not always pointing at the goal. So we have to align to where we are in the present day. And the only way you can do that is to get really present with who you are in this moment, accepting of who you are in this moment, understand the terrain under your feet this second, then act. Take one small action, 100% all in, and release the outcome. I love it when people will say stuff like the game was on a stick and blah, blah, blah. None of that is ever true. You know, even if you're a golfer and you're thinking about the Masters in Augusta, you know, yeah, sure, they may have won by one stroke, but I'm gonna guess that the 259 strokes that they took before that one were also probably important, right? So go all in, release the outcome, and that's the final piece. So that's the activation framework of focus, align, and act. And we can get to your subtraction question next.
Jason, jump on in. I know that you're ready to go, and I do have some follow-ups to what he's sharing with us now, but go ahead.
Well, there's a little bit to unpack here for me, so thank you guys. But Govindh, as you were talking, especially, I mean, it makes so much sense. You know, put yourself in that 3D state. You know, put all of your senses there and go there and focus on that, and you know, be there. I mean, as we understand quantum mechanics more and more, I mean, they keep telling us that time's already happened. You know, we're just experiencing right now, but I mean, the past, the present, and the future are all simultaneous, right? So I mean, put yourself there. And the act part, I get, you know, go all in. I mean, you know, release the outcome and just see what happens and just go with it. You know, it's the align part, right? And when you were talking, one of our common friends, our mutual friends, Alex Sharfin, the great Alex Sharfin, came to mind, right? And you said, align with where you are, you know, clean the mental lens, be present in your body, give yourself massive self-love. And I remembered Alex saying, as a challenge, I don't know if this was, you know, in our men's group or separately, but he said, stare at yourself in the mirror every day for 20 minutes and give yourself compliments. And then I remember him saying, if you can do it, you know, and it seems like such an easy task I mean, it's self-love, you know, I mean, and we can make jokes about, what was it on Saturday Night Live, the Smalley guy, you know, people love me and I have friends or whatever that is. But I've tried to do that. You know, I've tried to like be with myself and stare into the mirror and into whatever that abyss is, you know, in my own eyes. And it's harder than you would think. I don't know. At least it was hard for me. I don't want to put, you know, thoughts into other people, but it's a challenge. And getting aligned with that love for yourself, I think, is so powerful. And yet at the same time, such a challenge. And I know I don't want to make any assumptions, but it's probably a challenge for a lot of people because we're not really encouraged to self-love. You know, we're not encouraged, at least I wasn't encouraged. I don't want to say boast or brag. That's not what I mean, but you know, to have that pride in yourself. I mean, we're taught to be humble. We're taught, you know, don't be loud, you know, just, you know, all these things. And it's hard to say, you know what, I am a good person and I do these good things. And here's what I do. And here's the value I'm putting into the world. It was a big challenge for me. And I hear you saying the same thing in the focus, align, and act, you know, framework. So I appreciate that. And it's now that you said it and I'm recalling Alex Sharfin, I need to go back and revisit some of that. I think I'd love to hear you speak on that.
Jason, you know, look, let's be clear. Align is the hardest part for people. And when people are not achieving what they want to on a day-to-day basis, it's because the align part is broken. People can sort of figure out what they want, sort of, sometimes. I mean, sometimes people figure that out. Sometimes figure out the other things. And people figure out that they have to do stuff, right? They have to get off the couch and do stuff. That makes sense. But before we started, when we were in the green room, Jason, you spent some time, like 5+ minutes, pumping James's tires, telling me about how great he was, right? So here's the thing. It's actually easy. We just choose not to do it for ourselves. We give other people that we care about the compassion that we need to give to ourselves. And look, this is the ultimate put your mask on first thing. If you can't do this, if you won't do this for yourself, and I heard you say the word try, and I love this, you know, specifically what it would mean to you to try. Specifically. Well, it doesn't mean that you're trying, it means you're doing it. So my point to you is you don't have to do 20 minutes. Do 1 minute. Just do 1 minute. You know, you get out of the shower. If you're a little bashful, put some clothes on, and then, you know, look at that dashing fellow in the mirror and just say, hey, I love you just the way you are, and I believe in you and what you're doing. Just use that. Start there and see what comes from that, right? And what's amazing about this whole thing is I'm going to guarantee you, the people who are listening, people are going to say, "Oh, it doesn't work." Have you tried it? Have you tried it for more than 10 seconds once a bunch of times ago? So the idea here is when you do this on an ongoing basis, it is putting the oxygen in your lungs. It allows you to be in your present moment. It allows you to be who you are right now. And you've done the quantum part, right? So you've done the quantum the quantum thinking, putting yourself in the future, then you bring yourself right back to now, not some fictional place that existed in the past and not some out of body extrapolation that you think exists right now. Mr. Rogers had it right. I like you just the way you are. There's nothing wrong with that.
I like that too. And I just want to say, James mentioned earlier in the show that, every year he recommends people read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I've read it before. Rachel, my wonderful wife, has not read it yet. But we're in the middle of reading it together. And so we take on these projects. And full disclosure, welcome to the Bradley household. We read out loud to each other every morning and every evening, which is a lot of fun. And so we experience those things. But what I really find really amazing, and it just kind of fell into place for me right now, and maybe I'm off, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in Think and Grow Rich, it really is kind of focus and then act. I mean, that's really what that whole book is about, right? I mean, it's, picture yourself and this and that and bring the desire in. And then people that take action on that, they get what they want. I mean, that's kind of for people that haven't read the book yet, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the general of it. But that alignment part is not in there that I know of. And it's interesting to say you're the modern day Napoleon Hill. I'm kind of like, it's the modern day Napoleon Hill, but with like the secret sauce,
Just one letter. It's just one letter. Our great friend Alex is the guy who called me the modern day Napoleon Hill. So he was, and he and I are ridiculous disciples of Think and Grow Rich. So we've been geeking out and nerding out on this for a long time. And you're right. This idea of aligning with who you are and where you are in the present moment is missing from a lot of this kind of stuff, mostly because it's uncomfortable. It's the hard and messy part of it all. And a lot of people, don't want to do it. So if it's easier to give people stuff that they want to do than they don't want to do. And it's also the highest ROI. It's literally the nitrous oxide in your engine that kicks things off. If you are able, and it was, a little while ago, I was trying to talk about it, that I used to say that, when you're paddling across a river, you've got alignment is keeping your nose right at the target the whole time. And what I've realized is that most of us aren't just going across rivers, we're going across vast lakes and oceans, vast bodies of water. And in those vast bodies of water, there's current, but there's also tides, and there's wind, and there's all kinds of things that are impacting your direction. And you're not always pointed at the right direction. You're not always pointed at the goal. You're pointed off goal. So if you're not aware of where you are, if you're not aware of the wind, and if you're not aware of the current, and you're not aware of the tide, and you're not aware of all of these factors impacting your vessel, then you're never going to make it to the other side. Wow. You're never going to make the goal. So if you want to focus on what you want, you have to get really grounded. That's the next step. Get really, really clear on where you are right now.
Dr. Jason Bradley's chiropractor?
Yeah.
Do you know one of the things that they do?
Alignment.
They align the spine. And not only that, but through the alignment, they bring nervous system back on track and alignment to all aspects of health, whether it's vascular health, glandular health, muscles, elimination, all the health streams of connection. So like you said, alignment doesn't always feel good. and people don't always like to do what is extra in their life. They just like to do what the easy stuff is. So the alignment part is the challenge, and it doesn't always feel good when you get adjusted by a chiropractor. Sometimes it feels hard. Sometimes it feels a little, there's a jolt that goes into your body that doesn't always you don't always feel like you did the right thing at that point. But the chiropractor, they train, they follow the analysis of it. So it's cool how you're able to segue this into Sharfin telling you to go look in the mirror for 20 minutes. And you're
Yeah,
like, you don't
Alex
need
never
to,
told me that. But yeah, it's one of
but
the
Maybe
last
that's a special assignment for me that I need the full 20 minutes. I'm
well,
not sure.
well, I'll just tell you, like, the time that I spend in the mirror is to shave or trim my beard or whatever it is. So I give it about that much time, and I don't even like driving across town for 20 minutes. So it'd be hard pressed to get me to follow that exercise just because, the application of me saying, hey, I'm going to go look at myself for 20 minutes. But I can see the application that some people might need that.
No, everybody needs some version of this. And James, I'd say, hey, look, if you're not ready for the mirror, then pick up that notebook, pick up a Post-it note, and on a Post-it note, just say, James, I like you just the way you are. I love you and I believe in you. And here, here's a really powerful
I wrote
thing.
it down.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, and write it down every day. There's a really powerful thing and that I saw, and it was absolutely freaking gut wrenching. It was Steve Harvey, and he was in this interview online, and he was in tears. He was talking to a bunch of men, and he was in tears. He said, when my father died, I realized it was the last time I was ever going to hear somebody say, "I'm proud of you." Because he goes, men don't say that to each other. Men aren't. My dad was the last person who wanted me to be better than him. Everybody else doesn't really want that. Now, I don't necessarily believe that to be true. And I'm lucky. I'm blessed. Like, I am blessed. I'm so lucky to have wonderful friends like Jason in my circle that I can, that I spend time with, and we lift each other up, and we say things like, I'm proud of you and I believe in you and I like you just the way you are. Like, these are important things for us to hear out in the world, but it's also important for us to receive them from ourselves. Now, I'll say this last thing. If we can't initiate that for ourselves, there's no number of times you can hear it in the world and receive it. Right? You have to grease the wheel by getting comfortable with receiving those words from yourself. And then when you receive them yourself, you can sit in the discomfort of receiving it with someone else. And you're so right, James. You talked about the release, the alignment. I was talking to somebody else today about part of my magnetic leadership formula, and Focus, Align, Act is the activation framework of this. And I was talking to her about how, she was having a situation and confidence was a little bit leaky. And I said, hey, you didn't give that person feedback because your confidence is a little leaky. And here's all the things that are happening in this situation. She went and dealt with that. And she said, it's unbelievable. My back feels better. My shoulders are looser. My neck is open. I just feel so much more relaxed now. We hold all of this stuff in our body. So align is absolutely the right word. Having Dr. Bradley here is perfect because alignment is so important to our physiology. We hold so much in our fascia. And when we let some of that go, and we can have interventions and therapy to release it, but we can also train ourselves to release pieces of it a little bit at a time. And this activation framework is a great place to start.
I love that. And I want to get to that activation framework for sure. And I could geek out on philosophy all day, but I just want to share a couple of things that popped up, and then I want to get into this activation framework. Recently, a colleague of mine asked why I thought so many people were stressed or anxious and depressed. And I answered in a way that I think is very pertinent to this conversation, where I quickly answered. I didn't even think about it. And I said, I think people are out of alignment and out of integrity and out of ethics. And what I meant by that is, I think if James said something really smart earlier in the day to me at breakfast that could have been Paper Napkin Wisdom. The man drops pearls of wisdom every 5 minutes. But something to the effect of you're either the sail or the rudder of the boat. And if you're the rudder and it's just getting moved around by the current, and you don't really know what you're doing, but I mean, the sail is really what's, moving you forward, and you got to be in charge of the sail and the winds and all of that. And it really hit me. And I think there's so much confusion out there, we can dive deep into it if we want, but there's so much confusion out there. There's a lot of people say that, we're drowning in information, but starved for wisdom. I mean, there's so much there that I think people forget. What is their alignment? What is their integrity? What is their ethic? What is the moral? I mean, we've kind of lost sight of that as humanity with all the noise around us. And then it reminded me of this quote attributed to Jesus. I'm not trying to be religious here, in one of the maybe forgotten gospels that maybe isn't included all the time, the Gospel of Thomas, one of the Gnostic gospels, where he's quoted as saying, "When you come to know yourself, then you will be known, and you will realize it is you who is the Son of the living Father." And what I get from that is, I mean, welcome to my Gnostic world. We are all fractals of the source God, and if we forget, we forget that. I mean, we forget that we are divine ourselves. We are divine creatures. We are created by divinity. We are divinity, in my belief system, in my humble opinion. And it's this idea of alignment. If we don't know ourselves, if we can't be present with who we are, where we are, how we are, we're just kind of drifting, and I think it's such an important concept that was overlooked in the seminal work, Think and Grow Rich Again, that we keep referencing. Now that you've said it and now that you've thrown it out there, I realize this is such an important piece of the puzzle. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you can't unsee once you see it. And, why did Jesus sit with the poor and touch the lepers? Because he saw divinity within them. He saw the God that was within them. He was the connection to who they really are. And if we are here to become who we really are, if the brilliant, bright and shining light that Marianne Williamson talks about, if that's what we are, then what I didn't say in a line was go up there and pump your tires and tell yourself that you're the best at this and the best at that and the best at this. But we have a lot of neuroplasticity, and we can accept ourselves just the way we are. We can give ourselves love for just the way you are. You can believe in what you're doing and who you are, just the way you are. And when we do that, it opens up the opportunity for us to even be present. Because if we can't be present in our bodies, if we can't be present with our physiology, if we can't be present with who we are in that moment, we can't notice anything that's going on around us. And we talked about realities. We can geek out about quantum realities for, years. This is one of my favorite subjects. But really think about it. If we are everything and nothing, then we get to choose. So why wouldn't we choose to be exactly who we are, so that we have a starting place, and we can take our own step, not a fake step, but a real step from where we are.
That gets me to your story, which I think is a big reason why we're all meeting today. It's your story, and the story of reclaiming yourself from your weight loss journey, reclaiming yourself from your debt journey. And how did you use these skills and build yourself into who you are today based on these frameworks? And did you find these frameworks before that, or did you find these frameworks after that?
Oh, it was simultaneous. I was doing the podcast. I started the podcast when I was 400 pounds. And by the time I had finished the first season, I dropped about 100 pounds, and then 60 very quickly after that. And the weight stayed off, and then some. So I've gotten progressively healthier. Today's a little bit of a rough day. I tweaked my back doing deadlift, but that's a good thing, right? I'm in the gym every single day, and Jason, don't worry, I'm okay. I'm feeling good now. I did a little bit of stretching. I'm in good shape. It wasn't really a bad thing. It was just a little tweak. But the reality here is I didn't even know. So here's the naivete and possible arrogance I had back at the time when I started all this stuff, is when I went through it, I had the results of being in it, right? I was doing Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'd lost all this weight. Business success was happening, and I thought I'd figured it out. So I gave people what I thought I knew at that time, and it was obviously very good. I mean, people liked it. It was successful, and I did a lot of coaching and speaking and all those kinds of things. But what I went on to learn is that I really didn't understand it. I had to experiment with it again, and part of it was sort of losing my way a little bit. I'd let go of the fundamentals, and what happened for me to cause that was my youngest son got bacterial meningitis, and for a good 2-3 weeks, we weren't sure if he was going to make it. And then those 2 or 3 weeks, I remember sitting in this very chair, looking at the stairway out my office doors, the stairway going up to the kids' bedrooms, and I can see his front door. And back in those days, my door would be open every single day, and I'd be looking up that stairway, and I'd be thinking to myself, am I ever going to see him come down those stairway again? Am I, can we even live here if he never comes back to this house? And that period of my life shook me, right? That was a challenge that I wasn't equipped to deal with. I equipped myself to deal with the business challenges, but I had not understood the value of the activation framework, focus, align, act in my life, because I wasn't applying the align properly. And this was a big thing that just threw me upside down. James,
can we just give the framework of when this all happened? What was like the arc here, the story arc? When were you 400 pounds? When did you start the podcast? When did you drop the first 100? When did you drop the next 60? How long has that origin of your life been established?
Okay, so I was somewhere around mid-30s to 30. Let's say 38. So that would have been somewhere around 2007 that I was 400 pounds, or growing to 400 pounds. Let's put it that way. And when my son got ill was around 2019. So I had a pretty good period in there where I started Paper Napkin Wisdom. I lost all the weight, and I was in great shape from 2012 onward. I even ran a half marathon in 2012. I actually got off a plane from Dubai. The next day, I ran the half marathon and kicked the crap out of my Achilles, which was not fun, but I still finished it, and I was really proud of myself. So I was in progressively better shape over that period of time. By the time 2019 came along, 7 years later, I think I'd taken some of this for granted. I stopped the podcast almost immediately at that time. I'd been slowing down on the podcast for some time leading up to that anyway. And I stopped the podcast and focused only on family. And so now we're 2019, if that makes any sense. Yeah, that's correct.
And when did the podcast start?
The podcast started approximately, let's call it 12 years ago. So 2013, 2012.
So through direct osmosis of influence, when you first started this podcast, it had a profound impact on so many aspects of your life. And eventually you got to the point where you're like, well, I need to focus on other things now. And that's a responsible step.
Right. And then what happened in that sort of dark period that followed, I mean, it wasn't dark right away, but after, so he got better. He lost hearing on his right side, and otherwise has fully recovered, which is wonderful, and miracle. He did get a cochlear implant, which he, as a 6'4" strapping athletic teenager, refuses to wear. And so he's happy just to hear out of one ear, much to his parents' chagrin. But regardless, he's ambitious, and a wonderful young man, now 15 years old. So ironically, after he got better is when all the stress and the pain of his recovery really hit me and plunged me into some really dark times. I think I needed to rediscover a lot of things. And about 2 or so years ago, 3 years ago, I slowly found my way out. And part of the reason and part of the way that I found my way out was by rediscovering. It's funny, you invent something, you create something, give it away, and then it's the thing that saved me. So finding Focus, Align, Act again really saved me, because I was able to focus on what I wanted, and I didn't want to feel like I did. I needed to give myself the self-love that I was not giving myself. I was beating myself up for years of not acting as well as I could have, not doing as much as I could have, not doing as much business as I could have, not succeeding as much as I could have. I had an inventory of deficiencies that I'd love to go over with myself. And I had no problem, Jason, giving myself 20 minutes of time and lambasting myself for every one of the mistakes, right? But man, finding 1 minute to give myself some love was impossible. And the activation framework got that lens clean again and got me back to where, obviously where I am now, once again.
I think it's just super, and it's such an inspiring story, and I relate to it. I'll share that here in a minute. But, at our house, we talk about be, do, have, be, do, have, be, do, have, who do you have to be to do the, you have to be the person, or, embody that person, and then do the things that person would do to have the life that you want. And I think that a lot of people get that inverted, where it's, if I only had more time or more money, then I could do these things, either for myself or for my family or for the world. And then I could finally be that way that I envision myself to be. And I think that a lot of people have it inverted. But when I look at things, when I look at the Focus, Align, Act framework, I mean, I'm seeing be, do, have. I mean, it really is focused on, no pun intended there, but it really is centered on, the be part. I mean, focus on who you are, who you actually are, be in alignment with who you are, that beingness. And it's one of those things where I think there's a long quote somewhere that, if they would have taught me these things in kindergarten, I'd be a lot better off. But I mean, it's one of those skill sets that I just don't think that even gets mentioned.
Dude, we learned this when we were in kindergarten. We were told that it was childish and forget it. It was belief before evidence. And look, kids are if we really think about survival as humans, we learn it all in the right order. We learn to breathe, right? And then we learn to find food. It's right over here, right? It's where mom is. So we find food. And then after that, we learn to open our eyes and sort of communicate that, my bum's a little wet. Maybe you can help me with that, please. And we communicate that we're hungry. And so we figured that part out. But one of the really next things that comes is make believe, right? We pretend as children that we're even communicating with the adults around us. And what are the first things we do as kids? When you watch kids, the first thing they pretend to be is their parents. They play house. Why? Because their parents are by far the most confident, incredible people in the planet to them. So who else to pretend? They're the superheroes. You don't need Superman when he's right there. It's your dad. And you don't need Supergirl when it's right there. It's your mom, right? Who needs Wonder Woman? I got mom. So I'm going to pretend I'm going to play house. And that's what we used to do, right? So we made believe. And we made believe because we were practicing the skills that we want. It's focus on what we want. That skill of belief before evidence is literally one of the first 5 skills we learn as children, and then we beat it out of our kids. We say, that's childish. Don't do that. Don't make believe. Don't imagine. You're such a daydreamer, right? Get into reality. Wait a minute. It is reality.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I think it's super important, and Brad, James, commented here. It's amazing how much better, he feels giving himself an hour or so a day just to be better and learning to live like that after, beating cancer, which is awesome that he beat that cancer. I think that's incredible. But I think it's awesome. It's sad to me, and James and I talk about this quite a bit, but it's sad to me that very often people end up facing this life crisis to then make these changes. I think that, we're all led on the path that we're led on and experience the things that we experience for a reason to bring us to where we are right now. Right. But how cool would it be if instead of squashing those dreams and ideas that, the little 4-year-olds have and 5-year-olds have, if we instead said, yeah, lean into that, embody that, and learn that skill set rather than waiting until there's something, whether it's a cancer or a death or a tragedy of some sort, or a crisis. It'd be so great if we had that skill set, I have a question for you to kind of bring this to something practical, which we try to do. James is really good at this. I'm going to try to do this myself. Govind, I have struggled with weight as well. My whole family has been overweight, except for my mom, who weighs like 85 pounds. I'm kidding a little bit, but I mean, that woman couldn't gain weight if she tried. But everyone else, brothers, sisters, dad, aunts, uncles, grandparents, everybody, cardiometabolic syndrome, overweight, really fighting obesity even, and all the stuff that comes with it. I myself at one point was 285 pounds. And I would say that I did the work, I got my weight down to what I would say is a really healthy, manageable, sustainable 185. I'd love to be, ripped, and cut, but I work on that too, but maybe I could work on that a little bit more, but I'm really happy I'm not at that morbid obesity anymore. But it's interesting, someone that works with autoimmunity and hormonal imbalance, and especially, being, the thyroid authority, with thyroid, a lot of weight problems come, a lot of other, kind of secondary, tertiary hormone issues come, and weight can be an issue. Metabolism can be an issue. So here's the question. I'm going to try to frame it the right way, because I know what I had to do mentally. I call it mental gymnastics. But the question is, in this idea of alignment, how important is it that people believe they can lose weight? I mean, you're 400 pounds and now you're not 400 pounds. I was 285 and now I'm 185. How important is it that people believe they can lose weight? And I ask because I meet so many people who tell me things like, no matter what I do, I just can't lose weight. And that's the narrative that they have over and over and over in their heads that they keep repeating to themselves and also out loud. And I just wonder how much of an impact those types of narratives have on the actual outcome. I hope I'm asking that question the right way.
Yeah, you really are. So the unconscious mind is a very powerful thing, right? And the unconscious mind is where, it's this great assistant that we have here, and it really wants to help our body stay healthy. And at the same time, it doesn't really understand instructions very well. When we say, I don't want to be fat, it doesn't process the negative, right? It hears, I want to be fat. And if I don't want debt, I want debt. I don't want to be broke. I want to be broke. It doesn't process negatives. And let's try it out. Don't think of a pink elephant. Don't think of a purple tree. Right? Automatically, you're thinking about these other things. So it doesn't process negatives naturally. So we can use that to our advantage. And part of it is, again, focus on what you want, not what you don't want. Focus yourself being in the picture of what you want, right? Being in the state of what you want. You're in that moment. In a 3D movie, feeling it, touching it, smelling it, tasting it, you're there. Then you align with where you are and give yourself some self-love. And so your point is exactly right on. We can only achieve what we believe in. The evidence always trails. The evidence is the lagging indicator. The leading indicator is belief. So if you believe that we, and Einstein said it, you believe it or you don't, either way, you're right. The reality of the situation is that what we believe is true. It is true. There's a reality right now where that exists. And our human mind is not capable of processing all the data that comes to us, especially in this data age, right? So imagine if we're processing, if we're assaulted by 2 million bits of information per second, we're actually able to only process 126 of those. That's 0.006%. That's nothing. So who are you to say that that's not reality? Well, it may not be the reality that you're focused on today, but there's a reality where you're in your best health. And you've achieved that reality, Jason, for yourself. So you know that can be. And I'm not talking about sitting on a rock and manifesting 100-pound weight loss. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that you have to believe that it's possible. And if you've got some underlying health conditions like thyroid issues or whatever, of course, there are places where you can get help for those things, right?
Thyroidauthority.com as one example.
Thyroidauthority.com is one authority. But there are places where you can get this help for the variety of different things that might be impeding your progress. But the thing that is most impeding your progress is the 9 inches between your ears.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the belief that needs to be there before the evidence. And I say that lovingly to the people who are challenged and having that problem. But really be mindful about the program that you're uploading into your unconscious, and think about the negatives that you're giving to yourself, and think about changing those. Think about deliberately shifting away from those to focusing on what you want, eliminating these I don't want this thing. Think about only what you want and tell yourself the right story.
I'd love to hear James on this. I'm going to pass it over to him because James has read Think and Grow Rich about 1 billion times and hangs out in these circles and has these very deep conversations for very many years. James, I'd love to hear what's going on in your 9 inches between your ears.
Well, I still want to keep featuring Govindh in today's interview. I'm very interested in his journey. I'll share some of my insights as we continue on, but I get to this juncture in the game where we're on this massive interview right now, and we're getting so much insight from a very accomplished writer, very accomplished businessman, has gone through his own personal family struggles he's sharing and health struggles he's sharing. And the part that I was really impressed about by the back work and the research that we did before today's show was his financial part of his reality at one point. I don't think most people even make $6 million in a lifetime, but the bio on him was a deficit of 6 million.
Right.
And not only were you able to overcome the health, the familial issues, but the financial distraught moments of your life. And you might have had this inborn intelligence inside of you. We were talking about that earlier. The predetermination of things were already set in place. But how did that line up for you once again on this timeline arc that I asked you earlier? The podcast, the weight loss, the debt, and then the phoenix rising from the ashes of all of this and the permission to find out these frameworks. How did that all line up for you, man?
Yeah. So it was between 09 and 13 that I did most of that rebooting, 13, 14. And I've had the great privilege of making 6 million and losing 6 million and making 6 million and losing 6 million several times. So I've done that loop a bunch of times. And I'll say this about, and I didn't accept this when I was in the journey, especially when I was at the bottom of the journey. When I remember walking down the street at times, looking at people with a hat and cash in their hat and thinking that they had more money than me. I remember making payroll by some miracle sometimes, and just catching receivables in enough to be able to make payroll and thinking that I'm so happy that I made payroll, but I have no money. Like every one of my staff had more money than I did. And I remember with young kids at home having the hydro cut off because I didn't have money to pay for the bills. And the hydro being electricity, I should say, depending upon where you are. So, you know, been through that a lot of times. And I'm going to give you a sort of maybe an unpopular answer to the question that you asked, James, is money is not the object of anything. And I was foolish enough to make it the object. It was the measure. It was the stick I used to measure my success. And because it was the stick I measured my success with, it was elusive. It wasn't safe with me. Right. So money wasn't safe with me. Money was something I used and abused. And the moment that I realized that it was that money is the energetic balance that you get in exchange for the growth that you give, the love that you give, the impact that you make, and it's a clue that things are moving in the right direction. That's when money came to me and was safe. That's when money came to me and it stuck. That's when I believe that my magnetic growth aura really took over. And that's what I call it. Magnetic growth aura really takes over when you can combine what I call the 4 pillars of confidence, congruence, calm, and contribution. When you have those pillars in alignment on top of the activation framework, that's when you really turn on your magnet. And I've seen people get opportunities that they've never seen before the moment that they have their pillars in alignment, that they create so much momentum in their lives. It's incredible. So for me, I was on the roller coaster over and over and over again. And I remember one time a great coach, her name was Gina Monaco Long, and she came to me and said, "Hey, you've had a lot of ups and downs." And I was like nodding with her, almost thinking that she's about to compliment me, saying, "Yeah, you've had a lot of ups and downs, and things came and they came, went. It sounds like you've had a real roller coaster." So yeah, why did you believe people that life had to be that way? Right. And I bought into that. I believed that good things happen and bad things happen and good things happen and bad things happen. It doesn't have to be that way. And when I changed my belief and when I focused on growth instead of scale, when I focused on impact instead of money, everything else stabilized.
Yeah, I really believe that what you're sharing are like life wisdom for people. And most people have one of the 3 stressors: thoughts, traumas, or toxins, physical, chemical, or emotional. And the part that most people don't realize is the financial aspect of all of it. And that's like the iceberg under the water analogy. Is the financial is the iceberg under the water for most people, and then the health clings on to that, and then the emotion clings on to that, and then you have this head that sticks above the water that looks in the mirror for 20 minutes saying nice shit to themselves. And I think that that's the real takeaway for me today is it doesn't matter what our accolades are in this lifetime. We have to get congruent with the alignment, and we have to create plan for ourselves to actually take action. And the worst thing to do is not. One of my mentors was John DeMartini, and he would always tell me, you have to give yourself permission to be great. No one else is going to do that for you.
Yeah. And look at the choice of words though from Martini, right? Be great, not do great things, not accomplish amazing tasks. It's be great. And it's so much simpler than we like to make it, isn't it? Right? When we really listen to that advice, it's brilliant.
And one of the coolest things in my lifetime is I got a chance to meet John at one of his talks in Denver many years ago. And I was the last person in the room at his talk. It was about 3 hours long. And I was making a documentary at the time on chiropractic. And I stayed to the end of the talk, and I said, "Hey, John, I'm a very inspired individual. I'm making a movie on chiropractic. I'd like to have you be in the movie. Would you agree to be in my movie?" He's like, "As a matter of fact, I'm glad you asked me. I have a few extra days here in Denver. Here's my room number.
Mm.
You can come and interview me at my hotel. I'm at the Ritz Carlton. This is the room. I'll give you 2 hours." So, anyways, went and saw John DeMartini, went to his hotel and got to meet him. Many years later, I come back to one of his rooms where he's holding a lecture, and he's like, "Before I get started today, I want to give a chance to recognize somebody that made a profound impact on me, that I think he'd make a profound impact on you, because there's an individual out here named Jim Chester, and I want him to stand up so you guys can recognize him, because this is a man that actually said he was going to do something. He actually did it, and he followed through on his desires, and he followed through on his plan, and he actually did something that not a lot of people will ever accomplish. He made a movie on chiropractic, and he asked me to be in it. And I just want to acknowledge him for actually doing what he said he would do. Can you guys give him a round of applause? And I'll just tell you that, like, foundational moment for me is the reason why Jason gives me accolades that he does before we go in and speak to people like yourself on these podcasts. It's because you have to become that person in order to have somebody with the accolades of Dr. Jason Bradley, that has a, master's in journalism, a background in functional medicine, and multiple certifications in helping people get better with their health, from a doctorate in chiropractic to so many different levels. So to be admired by that man, and to be acknowledged by the other man, and to be able to talk to you today, Govind, it's such a pleasure, because you do have to be it. And
Yeah.
like he said, we do have to do, be, have. And all this is the alchemy of who we get a chance to portray ourselves as. And if we can have a few good men say a few nice things about us, hey, why not?
Why not?
Why not? And I love that. And I think, early in the interview, Govind, I'm not sure if this is what you said, but this is what my notes say. Something around, I don't even remember what this was, but it's don't hesitate to reach out to people. And I think that what James is saying, it is really like focus, what is my desire? Here's the 3D. I'm going to make the chiropractic documentary that was a award-winning documentary, as a matter of fact. And James was that person and in alignment. But I think the third thing is he took action, and you were able to get DeMartini, there. And now you guys are good chums. And, you've introduced me to him. And, I've been blessed just by your action that you took, a decade ago or whenever that was. It continues to just have this ripple effect. And I think it's just so important. We never know. I don't know what I'm really bad with colloquialisms, but the actions that we take, they have a profound impact on others, tomorrow and whatnot. I just think it's just really interesting. And I really appreciated the Govind, that the subconscious mind can't process negatives. And I just really appreciate that, because now I'm thinking of pink elephants and purple trees. So I just greatly appreciate that.
And all the things that people need.
Right.
And let's allow ourselves to think about things a little bit differently here too, Jason. Instead of calling it the subconscious mind and being subservient to our conscious mind, let's think of the unconscious mind. It's a partner to our conscious mind. It's something that we don't rely upon. We don't activate appropriately, but it's there, and we can activate it if we're thinking about it, if we're conscious about how we activate it, if we evoke it in the right ways.
Well, it's interesting and just kind of tongue in cheek funny. Earlier on social, I always post these questions. I said, is it possible to be anti-negativity? And I've gotten a lot of answers to that, a lot of interesting answers to this question. But it is an interesting question in what we're talking about today. I mean, we really can't. I guess we can be anti-negativity in that our unconscious mind doesn't recognize the negative part. It doesn't process the negative. I mean, it just sees the positive of it. So, which is it's curious. I appreciate this, gentlemen.
Yeah. And so when we're conscious about what we're feeding ourselves, right? When we're conscious about what we're telling ourselves, and we become clear about what we want, then we can, build that leadership containment of confidence, contribution, congruence, and calm. And when they are aligned on what we really want, and when we're building them together, and the problem is for most leaders, like when they don't have the pillars well aligned, when it doesn't look like it's crumbling. That's, Rome is not falling when the pillars are not fully aligned, but it leaks. It's inefficient. It doesn't feel right. And when it doesn't feel right, it isn't right. And people pick it up as saying, hey, something's off today. Something's off all the time with that person, or something like that, right? It just feels off, and everything is more work than it needs to be.
I hear you on that for sure. And I want to go back a little bit to, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but the idea of simplicity and subtraction. I want to go all the way back to subtraction. I started working on a project earlier last year that I put on pause for many reasons. I don't need to go into that right now. But it was around the carnivore diet. And then it became this idea of carnivore consciousness, because as I was exploring this carnivore diet, which for our listeners is just eating meat. And that's the extent of the diet. It's really simple. It couldn't be more simple than that. It's just eat meat. And I noticed personally a lot of health benefits around it. Blood pressure came down, HRV went up, weight got really stable, testosterone came up. I could go on and on. I think there might be a time and a place for it, and I don't want to get into that right now. But what I found while I was doing this carnivore exploration is that I wound up with not a lot of decision fatigue around what I was going to eat. Thinking about what I was going to eat or what my family was going to eat. What are we having for dinner? What are we having for breakfast? What are we having for lunch? It's this ongoing, thing where if it's carnivore, it's like, well, it's going to be meat. What kind of meat? Maybe there's a little decision there, but ultimately it's going to be some kind of meat prepared some kind of way. And that's the simplicity of it. And I found that as I was doing that, I started thinking about simplifying other parts of my life. My wife, Rachel, calls it Marie Kondoing our life. Marie Kondo, which is the joy of simplicity or whatever that is, right? But if it brings the spark of joy, I can't remember anyway. But I did that with my closet. I did that with every belonging that we have, and we really simplified our lives. And through that subtraction, through that simplification, what I found is that it opened up space for good things to come into. Not just with material stuff, but with the consciousness part of it, which is one of the reasons I'm not finishing that book project, because Rachel nailed it when she's like, I think you're more interested in the consciousness part than the carnivore part. So I got to think about that project. But nonetheless, I want to go back to simplicity and subtraction, because you mentioned, and we talked about it in the green room, we talked about it a little bit on the front part of the show, that there is a beautiful simplicity in subtracting things away from what you're doing rather than piling more and more on. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of times we think that growth is about doing more. We think that growth is about being more. We think that growth is about what more can I do? And there are good places for that kind of thinking. So if you're thinking about helping people, a good thing to ask about is, what more can I do? Maybe what's the most I can do to help somebody? That's an impactful way to think about making a difference. But when thinking about your own personal growth, or when you're thinking about your business, your work, or anything that you're doing in life, the answers tend to be found in simplicity. The more complicated we make it, again, we going back to this idea of simplicity on this side versus simplicity on the other side, and the simplicity on the other side of complexity is where we want to get to. And that is, going from 1 + 1 = 2 to E = MC squared. There's, a million blackboards full of mathematical formulas before you get to E = MC squared. So the question is, how do you get there? Well, you have to work through the complexity and then get rid of everything that doesn't matter. Because everything is energy. Anything that you do, anything that you walk through, any environment that you're in, it's all energy. And it's either adding to your energetic reserve or it's taking away from your energetic reserve. So subtract the things that are energy vampires in your life. And if you really think about, I don't really believe that time management exists. I believe that energy management exists. And if you're focusing on your energy, and you can test it out, right? When you and Rachel are hanging out, Jason, is there a limit to the amount of time you can spend with her?
I'm going to say no, but she might answer differently.
I didn't ask Rachel. I asked you.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of her.
Right. So my point is there are things and places and people that we can be with, and we've got no, time flies, and our energy is what matters. We're all in on what's happening, and time
Mm.
moves quickly, right? So time is very relative, but our energy is really the thing that we can replenish, and we have various buckets of energy. So there's one spiritual bucket, and it doesn't have to be religious, but spiritual, physical, emotional, and mental. And there are things that you can do to fill one of your buckets. So, for example, I might go to my basement and step on a treadmill, and that would help me fill up my physical bucket. But I take that walk outside with the dogs in a park, and all of a sudden I'm filling all of my buckets. So the same task in a different place gives me higher ROI on my energy. Why am I talking about energy when you ask about subtraction? I'm only talking about it because you use your energy to understand what of the activities, of the people, of the things around you are adding to your energetic reserve and which ones are taking away from that energy. Clutter, for example, takes away from your energy. Clean that clutter up, get rid of it. Make sure that you're in a clean, open space where you can work and be yourself. So anything that's taking you away. Now, James, on the other hand, you've got beautiful curios around you, beautiful totems of various experiences around you. In that case, that's all giving you energy. It's not clutter, it's energy that it's giving you. It means something for you to have these things. I know they're more than decorative. We talked about it in the green room as we before we began. So to me, it's about understanding what helps you, what gives you energy, and what doesn't help you, what takes away your energy, what the energy drains are, what the energy vampires are, and eliminate those things. The other thing that I think is also important to keep in mind is that we say and do things that deplete our energy, that leak energy out of that confidence, congruence, calm, and contribution, those four pillars that I talked about for magnetic leadership. We say and do things that are out of alignment with those things, right? Like if we're not really confident if we're not telling the truth early, right? So that's a little way people think that confidence doesn't mean that, but if we're confident about who we are, then we'll say the truth early about what we feel and what we think.
Mm.
If um, we're not really congruent if our words and actions don't match, and that's an easy one. But do they match under pressure? Do they match when no one's looking? Right? That's where congruence leaks. When, "Oh, well, no, I was late that day and I didn't tell anybody, but it doesn't matter because I was under a lot of pressure, or it was a really bad day and, my coffee machine blew up, so whatever," right? It doesn't ma when you make excuses for the lack of congruence, again, that's leaky. And then the other side of it is calm. Can I hold space for other people without rushing to fix it? Can I just be
Mm.
calm here, right? Do I have to fix everything that's happening around me, or can I just be here and be present and be curious,
Mm.
right? And if we can't be that kind of calm, then again, it's leaky. And then finally, contribution. Am I here for more than outcomes? Am I here to give encouragement and support to people? Well, that's contribution, right? So if you're in it for a transaction, if you're helping someone because you want the thank you, if you're helping someone because you want the praise or the ego lift, you're not just there to be there, right? So that's again, it's leaky and people feel transactional, maybe a little dirty about even accepting your help. But when these things are in alignment, your friends can feel it, your family can feel it, and strangers feel it when you're walking down the street, right? You're walking down the street, you know when someone is magnetic. You can feel it, right?
Mhm.
So understanding the law of subtraction helps you eliminate the things that leak your energy out and help you build your four pillars in alignment so that you can be truly magnetic.
That's powerful.
I got a little personal story I'm going to share with you, and it just happened 2 days ago.
Love it.
I'm flying home from emceeing an event down in Dallas, Texas, and I pop up into the United Club in Denver, and um, got a little layover. And anyways, time just was on my side, and I'm walking through the airport at Denver, and I see this lady over my shoulder, and I said to her, "Hey, do you have a famous YouTube channel?" I didn't know her name, but she looked very familiar to me, and you might know who she is. Her name is Barbara O'Neill, and anyways, she's from Australia, huge advocate for what Jason and I are doing with, the natural health world of bringing geniuses together and collecting geniuses and sharing their stories. And by the way, Govin, you're in that category. You're in that group. So as I was going through this airport, I see this lady, and I stop in my tracks, as you're saying, when somebody has magnetic energy and they recognize what's going on, like stars aligned, man. I stopped her. She says, "Yes, of course I'd do a podcast interview with you." And she's like, "Of course, here's my email address." And we're already on like the process of making this happen. So you're so spot on with what you're sharing here about how a person can transition their reality to a better reality, into a future betterment, and to more progress for other people around them. And that's just a really cool thing that you were sharing there. But I do have a question too. And I know we're getting short on our time, so let's see if we can do this with some brevity. Um, how many interviews have you done?
Oh, well, released on Paper Napkin somewhere around 500 or 600. But I've done at least double that never got released, or that were informal and not intended for that purpose.
So my
So
big question,
yeah,
my big
several thousand,
question
I'd say.
based on those numbers, what do the people that you've interviewed that were of interest to you, what do they do differently than the average person? And what is the average person completely missing that you found from these people
Hmm.
that you took your time to interview?
So what do the people that I interviewed do differently? I
Mhm.
think that the ones that are really interesting, and I gave you the leadership framework of confidence, congruence, common contribution. But what they feel like is they feel like safety, right? In being around them, they feel curious, they feel interested in me. As much as I'm interviewing them, they have a genuine interest in me. And I think you even shared that, James, in your situation. We were walking up to the podcaster. She showed a genuine interest in what you were doing. And I think that's, feeling that support, feeling that they walk their talk, feeling feedback and encouragement from them. I think those are the big things. If I were thinking about it, those would be
Yeah,
the
yeah.
big things that jump up to me.
Because it seemed to me that they gave you osmosis of confidence to make changes in your life, both financially and for your own health reasons. And
Yeah.
if I had some takeaways from it, I would say maybe just from me getting to know you for the past 2 hours, it would be you started a podcast and interviewed people of value. And because you were all mirrors of each other, they gave you the mirror that you need to look into based on their realities and their positions in this world, and the power of the mastermind that Napoleon Hill laid out for us in Think and Grow Rich. You actually embodied that and lived it. And because you had high caliber people in your lifestyle and your zone of genius, they gave you everything that you needed that you didn't know you needed as ingredients into your life to become the man that you are today on this podcast with us. And I think that
Yeah.
that's the real take home for me is it's not what other average people aren't doing, but it's what the people that are doing that damn thing that you needed, that told you who they were. It made a profound ripple effect in your heart and soul and embodiment that made you say, I'm not going to be financially bankrupt anymore. I'm not going to be physically challenged anymore. I'm going to make difference because I can learn from other people that are doing it just like I need to do it.
Yeah, and I may have gotten rid of a couple of those knots in that conversation because, I did focus on the positive. But you're absolutely right, James. And I think there's I think that I that energy, their energy transformed me. And part of the reason why is, and I fundamentally believe in this, if you want to be truly great at something, you have to do what you're great at. You have to be yourself, be that greatness, that great gift that you have, and give it away. And when you give it away, and so none of these people charged me. None of these, there was no economic exchange. There was nothing other than their time and energy and curiosity in me that happened. And in that transfer, it creates a tidal wave of reciprocal energy. And so when we do that for ourselves and when we do that for others, it creates this tidal wave of reciprocal energy. And that's what the magnetism is. That ripple that turns into a tidal wave is the magnet activating, is the magnet bringing you what you want. And it starts with being who you are, aligning yourself, focusing on what you want, aligning with where you are, acting, and giving openly, contributing wholeheartedly.
Expecting nothing in return.
No, release the outcome. There's no outcome other than the act. Love the outcome. Love the act, not the outcome.
There's a famous chiropractor named Sid Williams that would say, give for the sake of giving, love for the sake of loving, serve for the sake of serving, and full abundance and expect nothing in return. And
Yeah.
I think you embody that. And I love the fact that we got a chance to have you on for one of our podcast episodes today. I want to pass over to Dr. Jason because I know we're coming up on the edge of our time. I'm sure he's been super kind to sit back and let us jam as much as we have today, but I want to make sure that he gets the chance to have some closure today's conversation too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Govin, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking your time today and being so giving and sharing so much. If you could see my notes, I have pages of notes that I've kept from this conversation. And I will just say this to our listeners. There was so much gold that was dropped during this conversation that I would recommend going back, get yourself a pen and paper or, one of those, fancy writing devices that Govind has. But whatever you need to do, but go back and listen to this again and write some notes down, because what was shared on this particular episode is life-changing, like absolutely life-changing, if you'll let it be life-changing. And I think that that's the important thing. The other thing I just wanted to say, in addition to thank you, Govind and James, I love you gentlemen just the way that you are, and I believe in what you're doing. Govind, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm going to say that I'm going to start there. That's where I'm starting. Thank you.
Hey, I'm proud of this work that you've done. You've launched this podcast, Jason. I remember when you just talked about it as an idea, and then it came together, and you did it. And what you and James have done, man, it's beautiful. You started off hot, which is great, but you've kept it up, and I'm so proud of you for that. I believe in you, and I believe in what you're doing, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful work.
Appreciate the acknowledgement. I think that that's a quotient that you can't measure, is saying kind things to each other and actually meaning it. And that's congruent.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a big part of what we do here is we get a chance to build congruent message and talk to people that not many people get access to. And they can listen to these recordings evergreen for the rest of eternity if they choose to. And they get a chance to tap into your consciousness and how you become the man that you are today. And I think that that's the time capsule. We just lost a pivotal leader in the chiropractic space yesterday named Guy Riekman. And just scrolling through my social media and seeing all the comments that people said and lengthy messages that people left on his behalf about how he made an impact in their lives made me realize the work that we're doing today. We emblaze a time capsule of knowledge of these characters that we get a chance to interview. And I had a chance to interview Guy Riekman, and it impacted me. So I can't even imagine, president of 2 chiropractic colleges, chancellor of a college, and such a thought leader that we actually, I know, like he would reach out to me and just ask me about stuff. And just knowing that we do that type of work is very, very cool. And yeah, for us to take an idea from the top of a mountain and be on a show today with a brand around it and a movement around it. Yeah, it's more than an idea, and that's the cool thing about what we're doing. But Govind, it's been absolutely transformational. For our listeners, if you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or like you've been adding more and more to your plate without seeing real results, go for the reductionary model. Make a stop doing list. Govind just gave you the blueprint: focus, align, act. And sometimes growth means reduction, not addition. Head over to getbetterfasterpodcast.com. Check it out. Check out his coaching programs and his best-selling book. What's the book name again?
Paper Napkin Wisdom.
Paper Napkin Wisdom. What's your favorite napkin to write on?
These ones, the branded ones. I don't even know who makes them, but we get them all the time.
And if you guys are curious to write a paper napkin like Jason and I will do for Govind, send him one of your guys' messages that you're watching, and maybe you can use Jason's advice and write some messages that you wrote down during today's episode and watch the recording, or if it's live, send them over to us, send them to Govind. And just for bringing you guys back full circle, nobody's coming to save you, but the wisdom that Govind shared today proves that you have the power that you can save yourself one small intentional step at a time. Maybe it's looking into the mirror and talking to yourself for a minute and repeating, I believe you and love you just the way you are. That might be it. And Govind, thank you again for bringing this incredible message to the Get Better Faster Nation, and to you all, our GBF Nation. Thank you for listening and for your continued support. You know, the best way to show your support is, I say it every time, share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and get all the behind the scenes action we've got coming your way. We get asked all the time how to work with Dr. Jason Bradley and his incredible functional medicine team at Radiant Life, Radiant Health. Just click the link at getbetterfasterpodcast.com and we'll get you connected. We've got more incredible guests like Govind lined up that are going to blow your mind with real solutions for reclaiming your health, your happiness, and your life, and maybe your bank accounts too. Until next time, keep questioning everything and keep getting better faster. Thank you, gentlemen. Great show today.
Thanks for tuning into the Get Better Faster podcast. Join the movement and visit getbetterfasterpodcast.com to find all our episodes, micro content, and resources to help you and your family get better faster.